Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Moya and today I'm going to be showing you how I cut and sew this jumpsuit. So if you're interested, please make sure to watch this video to the end and please subscribe to my channel for more sewing tutorials. Thank you so much. I will see you in my next one. The first thing you want to do is to get a paper that is long enough from your waist to your ankle, even longer than what you need. The next thing I'm going to do is to take my round hip measurement. My round hip measurement is 39. If I divide it by 4, I will get 9.75. So I'm just going to take that 9.75 from the beginning on this point that you can see. Next, I will be adding 1 inch for seam allowance. My total is now 10.75 and I'm just going to take that on different points on my paper. The next thing you want to do is to connect using a ruler. So you are going to connect from the beginning to the end. Now you want to take your crotch length, and normally for my trousers I use 12 inches, but because this is a jumpsuit I'm going to add extra 2 inches, making it 14 inches. So 14 inches is the length of our crotch, but let's say you are very tall and you have body, then you can use 15, but 14 is okay for a lot of people that are average height. I'm just going to extend this 14 inches and I'm going to connect my extension using a ruler. I labeled my crotch area and I'm going to come over to the point where it intersects. Then I will come out by 1 inch and also go up by 1 inch. Then I'll use the curved part of my pattern master to draw a curve on the crotch area. To get my crotch extension, I will take my hip measurement, which is 39. I want a round figure, so I'm going to put it at 40. So if I divide 40 by 4, I'll get 10. If I divide 10 by 4 again, I'll get 2.5. So that 2.5 is what I will be transferring on this crotch area. Then I will grab my ruler and I'll connect this point to any comfortable point on my previous line that I made earlier. I'll come over to the top of my paper and label that my waist area. Then from the crotch area, like you guys can see, I will be taking my waist measurement. My waist is 27 inches. If I divide that by 4, I'm going to get 6.75. Then I also need 1 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to add the 1 inch seam allowance. I also need my waist to hip measurements, and normally I would use 9 inches for my trousers, but because this is a jumpsuit, we're adding extra 2 inches. So I'll be taking 11 inches for my waist to hip. Then I'll go ahead and label this as my hip point. I'll grab my pattern master because it has this hip curve like you guys can see. Then I'll connect from my waist to my hip. I'll also come to my center line and I'll mark 1 inch down. Then I'm going to connect this to my waistline. This is our front pattern, so I'm just going to label this as the front. We're all done with the front. Next is to draft the back pattern on the front pattern. So I'm just going to come over to the crotch area and I'm going to add 2 inches everywhere. Now let's connect this point. We are also going to come over to the crotch extension and we're going to take 2 inches from the top to the bottom of our pants. Once I'm done with this, I'm also going to connect with my ruler as well. I will label this my back. Then I'm going to come over to the crotch intersection. I will come out by 1 inch and also go up by 1 inch. Then I will connect this using my pattern master the way I did for the front. Our zipper is going to be at the back, so you want to create some room for that. I'm using 1.5 here, but I later reduced it because 1.5 is actually too much. Just use 1 inch for your zipper allowance, and I'm going to connect that. So we are done drafting our pattern for both the front and the back. The next thing you want to do is to cut. Now when you are cutting, please cut out only what you see me cut. Don't cut the lines that we have inside, just cut this one out. So we're going to use this one to cut our back piece first of all. We're cutting the back first, so I'm going to fold this material into 2. Then I will place my pattern paper on it, then I'll cut it out. Now this table was too small, so I went ahead to cut off camera. When you're done cutting, Please notch where you want your zipper to enter, the zipper allowance, and then set the back part aside. Now we're going to place our pattern on the table, and then we're going to trim off the parts that I labeled the back. So all these parts that I labeled back, they are going off. So now you start cutting. Also, this mark that we have on top is going off, so make sure you cut it out. I'm also going to go ahead and trace this pattern on another fabric. Remember, we're folding our fabric into two. Then I'll cut this exact pattern out. Now we're done with both the front and the back. This is what both of them look like. Then we're going to go straight into cutting our top. Remember that we just cut the trouser part of our jumpsuit. Now it's time to cut our top. Remember that our top is sleeveless. So I folded this allowance and it's going to serve as my zipper allowance. Next, I'm going to come over to the top of my paper and I'm going to take my shoulder measurement. Now my shoulder measurement divided by 2 is 7.5. So I'm going to mark that there. Next, I'm going to go from the top of my paper to the waist length that I want. For my waist length, I want 15.5, but I'm going to need extra allowance. That's 1 inch. So I'm going to add that. So I'm using 16.5 and I'm just going to mark this on different points on my paper. Then I will draw a straight line and label this as my waistline. Now I need my armhole, and to get my armhole, I'm just going to use my shoulder measurement, which is 7.5, and I'm only going to add half into it. Now, you guys, we're having a sleeveless top, so this armhole has to be really small. It cannot be big. If it's big, then our armhole will sag. So I'll be taking 8 inches for my armhole and I'm going to make a straight line. Once I'm done with this, I'm going to label this my armhole. Now we're going to take 7.5 again on our shoulder line. That's exactly what we have. Then we're going to go over to our armhole and mark the same 7.5 inches. Then we're going to use our ruler to make a straight line. I'm going to come over to the point where these lines intersect, and I'm going to draw a curve, and this is going to serve as my armhole curve. If I take my round bust measurement, it is 35. When I divide that by 4, it is 8.75. So I mark that on my armhole area. Then I'm going to come over to my waist area and divide my waist, which is 27. If I divide that by 4, that's 6.75. I'll mark that. And also, I'm going to mark 1 inch for my dart intake. Next thing to do is to connect these points. I'm going to come over to my waist and add 1.5 for seam allowance, and also on my armhole area I'm going to be adding 1.5 for seam allowance. Then I'm also going to connect these points as well. Now I'll come over to the shoulder line and I'm going to come down by 1 inch. Then I'm going to go over to that zip part and I'm going to mark 3 inches from the fold that we have. Then I will use my ruler to connect these points. I'm going to come over to this folded part and I'm going to mark 2 inches. Like you can see, this is going to serve for the back. Then I'm also going to mark 4 inches. This is going to serve for our front. I'm marking this on the other side, like you guys can see. Then I'm going to be using my ruler to make a straight line. Once I'm done with this, I'm also going to make a horizontal line as well on both sides. Then I'm going to curve these points. I also went ahead to label my front and my back. Also, I labeled my shoulder area. Now we want to come over to the shoulder area and we're going to mark 2 inches from the original shoulder line that we had. Then I'm going to use my pattern master, like a comfortable line on my pattern master. I'm going to use to connect from my armhole to this new line that we just made. So guys, we will not be using the former shoulder that we made earlier. We're going to be cutting this out, and that is why I put this sign. Also, we're cutting that part out as well. So now let's just grab our scissors and cut our pattern out. I'm going to come over to the shoulder line, and the original armhole that we used, which was 8 inches, I'll divide it by 2. So now we have 4. I'm going to mark on the 4-inch line and I'm going to extend it inwards, like you can see. From this point, I'm going to mark ½ inch. Then I'm going to draw a curve towards my shoulder line and another one towards my armhole. Now I'm going to come over to the folded area and we're going to mark 1/2 inch, and I'm just going to grab my ruler and I'm going to connect this to any comfortable point on my actual line. The reason for this is because I don't like putting that at the back of my dresses or tops, anything. I don't like putting that at the back. I only like that in front. So this is going to help me eliminate any bulge that can arise from not using a dart. The next thing I'll be doing is opening my fold up. Then you guys can see the mark that I have and the way I marked it. Then we're going to cut it out. Don't forget, guys, when our pattern is fully open, it is our back, but when it's folded, it becomes the front. So now for this open part, I'm going to grab my material, my fabric, then I will fold the fabric into 2. Once I'm done with this, I'm going to place the pattern on the fabric that we just folded, and we're going to trace the exact pattern out. We are done with the back, and this is what the back looks like. It's just the exact same thing that we traced out. I removed my black fabric because I want you guys to be able to see what I have cut out. Next is to cut the front. Now to cut the front, I'm just going to grab my paper and I'm going to trace out all those parts that we have for the front, like the neck area. We're going to cut that out, and also at the armhole area we're going to trace it out. We will also not be needing this fold that we have here, so you can as well cut that out. I'm just going to turn this paper to the other side, and I'm going to label this my front. So guys, this looks new, and we're going to grab our fabric again and fold into 2. Then we are going to trace this exact same thing that we have. We're going to trace it out. So guys, we are done cutting the front, and I'm just going to go ahead and label the front. Also, I'm going to grab the back and label it as the back. So guys, we have come to the end of the cutting tutorial. I placed the 2 front pieces together and I went ahead to sew along the crotch line. So if I open it up, this is what it's going to look like. Okay, so we're done with the front. We don't need to add any darts to the front, so we're just going to set this aside. For the back, remember that I notched the part that my zip is going to enter, and I'm just going to use my chalk to just mark down the line like this. This is just to show me my crotch area, but this is not where I'm sewing on. I'm going to be sewing 1/2 inch away from that. So from that point, I'm going to draw my line, my stitch line, and then I'm going to go ahead and sew. So I want you guys to pay attention when you are sewing. Please sew with the loose stitches on your machine, because a zip is still going to enter this, and you want to be able to easily rip this off for your zipper to enter when you are ready. Next, I'm going to mark where my zip is going to end. This is where my loose stitch is going to stop. Then I'm going to come over to the waistline and I'm going to mark 4.5 inches. This 4.5 inches is where I want my dart to be. So I went ahead to sew my zipper area, and for the part that that's going to enter, I notched it like you guys can see. Then I'm going to grab my tape rule and I'm going to measure 4.5 here again, just to confirm my measurement. Then I'm going to move down and mark 4.5 again. Next, I'm going to grab my ruler and I'm going to connect this point. Then I'm going to take my tape rule and I'm going to mark 1/2 inch on both sides of my line. Once I'm done with this, I'm going to measure the length of my dart, and the length of my dart is going to be 7 inches. Once I measure this, I will use my ruler to just connect from this new line to the top of my darts that I want. So I went over to the sewing machine and I sewed this, and this is what we have. You can see how nice and smooth it is. Now guys, you need to iron, because if you iron your projects properly, it is going to come out really nice. So I went ahead to iron, and this is what my result looks like. Very beautiful. Also, when you're ironing, don't forget to iron your zipper area so that it will be very easy when you want to insert your zipper. Now I'm going to open up my crotch area for the back, and I'm going to open up the crotch area from the front as well. Then I'm going to first of all match these 2 crotch area together, because I need it to like align properly. So I'm going to match this. Once I match this, I'm going to head over to my sewing machine and sew with half inch. Half inch is enough to sew. The next thing to do is to align my pants, and once I'm done with this, it's time to shape my pants. So I'm going to come over to the waist area at the back. I'm going to measure from the beginning to the end of the back what I have. What I have is 16 inches. So I'm going to just lift this 16 inches like you can see. Then I'm going to place that 16-inch mark on the front area, and I'm going to measure the total. Now, what you are going to do is to mark your exact waist measurements. Like now, mine is 27 inches. So I'm just going to mark 27 inches. Then I'm going to measure what's left. For me, what is left is 6 inches. So I already know that if I divide 6 inches by 4, I'm going to get 1.5 inch seam allowance for my waist area. Now let's go to the hip area. The next thing to do is to take my hip measurements. So I'm going to come over to my waist area, and I'm going to mark my waist to hip, which is 11 because we're making a jumpsuit. Then I'm going to set my front apart from the back. Then I'm going to mark the same 11 inches on my back as well. Then I want to measure the entire length at the back of my pants. Then I'm going to measure what I have in front as well. The same way we did for the waistline, I'm going to do for my hip parts. Then I'm going to mark my exact hip measurement, which is 39. I wanted some ease on my hip line, so I went ahead to add extra one, though it was unnecessary at the end of the day because I had to close it up. So I marked extra 1 inch. Then once I'm done with that, I'll measure what is left. So guys, what is left for me here is 3 inches. So I'm just going to take that 3 inches and divide it by 4. So when I divide that by 4, that's going to give me 0.75, I believe. So I'm going to take that exact measurement and I'm going to mark it on my hip area. So I'm going to mark it on that side, and I'm also going to mark it on the other side as well. Once you are done marking this, next thing is to grab your ruler and connect your points. For example, we are going to connect your waist to your hip line. Then once you are done with that, all you need to do is just to take a straight line to your, ankle or the length of your pants. Does that make sense? Another thing that I would like to emphasize is that when you're making this mark, you're marking it on just one part of your pants. For example, you can mark it on the front or you can mark it at the back. Then when you're done, you're going to shift that part that you just marked. For example, if you marked on the front, then you're going to shift it over to the back so that they align properly. So one is not going to be longer than the other. Both of them are just going to align just right. And then you go over to your sewing machine and sew. Like I said, you guys, this allowance that I used on my hip part was just too much. I had to adjust it in a little bit. So when you're using your own, when you are sewing your own, you might have to sew it up to say 1 inch, and it's going to be perfect. So guys, we're done sewing our pants for our jumpsuit, and this is what it looks like. We're going to do all the ironing later, but yes, sew your pants properly. Make sure that you close up all the allowances on the waist, because we're going to attach the front to it pretty soon. So let's move on. So the first thing I'm going to be doing is to sew my back together, and for my back I don't need any darts at my back, so I'm just going to place my back fabric right side to right side. Then I'm going to take my allowance is 1.5 inches. I'm going to start from the neck area. I'm also going to do that on the the waist area, and I'm going to connect this with a straight line. Then I'm going to go ahead to the sewing machine and sew. I'm done sewing, guys, and this is what we have. Don't forget to open your seam and give it a very good press. Next, we are going to move over to the front of our top, and I'm going to fold it into two, and I'm going to mark the midpoint like you can see. Once I'm done with this, I'm going to open it and lay it down. Then I'll just draw a straight point. This is totally not necessary, but if you just want to follow my step, then please follow my step. But you can just take your darts. Just go ahead and take your darts directly. So now I'm taking my darts, and my shoulder to bust point is 9.5, but I want the darts to fall below my bust point. So I'm going to be marking 11 inches instead of 9.5. That means that I am adding extra 1.5. Then I'm going to make that mark on this side. I'm also going to make the mark on the other side as well. Once I'm done with this, I'm going to confirm my measurements to see if I have the same thing on both sides. Then once I'm okay with this, I'm going to use my ruler to make a straight point. From the midpoint of my line, I'm going to mark 3.5 inches because that's my bust point to bust point. I'm going to mark it on my waist as well. I'm also going to mark it on the other side, 3.5 inches. And I'm also going to mark it on the waistline of the other side as well. Then I'm going to use my ruler to connect this as a straight line. And also connect on the other side, a straight line. Then I'm going to come over to the waist area and I'm going to take 1/2 inch on both sides of the line. As you can see, it's just to guide you with that, especially if you're a beginner. This will help you. Then once I'm done, I'm going to grab my ruler. I'm going to connect to the first point that we started making our marking. Can you see that? I'm going to do this on the other side as well. And once we are done, guys, this is going to guide you to take very good darts. All you have to do is just to fold it on this line. Then you're going to go over to the sewing machine and just follow the shape and sew your darts on both sides of your fabric. So guys, I'm done sewing and this is what we are looking like. Okay, so the only thing you need to do here is just to iron on the wrong side and on the right side of your fabric, and then your darts, it's going to look very, very fine. Once you're done with this, I'm going to bring the back parts of my top. Okay, so iron that one as well. I'm just going to go ahead and iron all of them. Then once I'm done, guys, I'm going to lay them flat like you can see. And the first thing you want to do is to join the shoulders, the two shoulders. Go ahead and join them on your sewing machine. Then it's time to shape our top. So I normally like to use my office pins to tack my fabrics together. So I'm just going to grab my office pin. I'm going to tack the back to the front. Now, because of how we cut and how we sewed, the back is going to be equal to the front, unlike the pants that we sewed earlier. So just go ahead and tack the front to the back on both sides, like you can see. Then the next thing is to take our measurements. Now my round bust is 35 inches. If I divide that by 2, that will give me 7.5. So I'm just going to make that mark over there. Now I'm going to mark what is left. And what is left is about 4 inches or so, yes. Then I'm going to divide what is left by 2, which is going to give me 2 inches. Then I'm going to take that on both sides of my top. Does that make sense? I'm also going to do that on the other side as well. Then I'm going to come over to the waist. My waist is 27 inches. So if I divide 27 by 2, that will be 13.5. So I'm just going to mark 13.5 again. Then I'm going to mark what is left. What is left is 4 inches. And if I divide 4 inches by 2, I'm going to get 2 inches. So I'm just going to mark 2 inches on this side. And I'm going to mark 2 inches on the other side as well. Once I'm done with this, I'm going to use a ruler to connect these 2 points. Very simple, you guys. Once you are done with this, just go over to your sewing machine and sew on that straight line. Simple and straightforward. So guys, the next thing I'm going to do is just trim off the excess allowance because I don't want too much allowance in my jumpsuit. So I trimmed the excess allowance on both sides of my fabric. Then another thing I want you guys to pay attention to is to trim off the waist area. Like you can see, just follow my step. The reason I'm doing this is because I don't want it to be looking funny or weird after I attach the top to the trouser of my jumpsuit. So I'm also going to repeat this step on the trouser part. That is the waist area where we did the allowance for the trouser part. I'm going to do it on both sides of my trouser. Like you can see, once we are done with this, the next thing we want to do is to attach the top to the trouser, and that is going to form our jumpsuit. Now look at what I'm doing here. I will first rip the zipper parts open. Then the next thing we want to do is to match the middle point of our trouser, that's the front area, with the front area of our top. And then we are going to use a pin to, join these 2 parts together. You can also use pins to support round the jumpsuits that we're making. Okay, so once we are done with that, we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're just going to sew round the waist. So if you did your measurements properly, you should have something that looks like this. So guys, this is what our jumpsuit is coming together to look like, and this is so beautiful. Next thing to do is to flip it over. Okay, this is what we have. Then we're going to insert our zipper. Here I used an invisible zipper. If you need a tutorial on how to sew an invisible zipper, then please comment below. I will make one for you. This is what the front part of my jumpsuit looks like. So to finish it up, I'm going to grab my bias tape and I'm going to use this to turn my armhole area and also the neck part. And once I'm done turning it, this is the finished look. I really hope this video was helpful. If it was, please give me a huge thumbs up, and if you have any more questions, please drop your comments in the comment section, or your questions, whatever you guys have to ask me, please drop them in the comment section. Guys, don't forget that ironing is what will make your jumpsuit very nice and beautiful. So when you are done sewing your jumpsuit, please make sure you iron. And guys, I would love to see your beautiful creation, so please make sure to tag me on Instagram. My handle is on the screen right now. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. I will see you in my next one. Bye guys.